Hey guys, tonight we journey far from the comforts of home, past your cozy mattress, past the sound of your fan humming in the background, past even the soft glow of your phone screen. Tonight we set foot on scorched soil, in a time where sandals squish in mud, soaked with both blood and rain, and prayers echo louder than battle cries. You're not watching this story, you're in it. Welcome to the First Crusade. It's the year 1099, and you've just arrived in the Holy Land. Except it's not so holy right now. You're on the edge of Jerusalem, sunburned beyond belief, sweat-drenched, and absolutely exhausted. Your lips are cracked from the desert wind. Your cloak smells like boiled cabbage and regret, and there's a strong chance that thing crawling up your leg is not a friend. The city looms ahead like a mirage, walls jagged, and grey fluttering banners atop towers, and the occasional glint of steel catching sunlight. You squint. Is that a knight? Or just another poor soul melting inside his helmet? Either way, you've made it. Almost. The end of this long, wretched march lies just beyond those ancient stones. But let's backtrack, shall we? You didn't wake up one day and say, "I'd love to walk across continents in homemade armor." No, it started months, maybe years ago. A fiery preacher stormed through your village, shouting about sins, salvation, and something about liberating Christ's tomb. You were bored, hungry, probably out of work. And before you knew it, you'd traded your hoe for a spear and kissed your goat goodbye. Poor goat. So here you are, a crusader. Well, a wannabe one. You've got a dented helmet, a second-hand cross stitched to your tunic, and absolutely no idea what you're doing. The road here wasn't a road at all. It was a savage, groaning trail of mud mountains and mosquitoes. And that was the easy part. The boats across the Mediterranean were worse. Imagine spending 10 days on a splintery deck, seasick elbow to elbow, with sweaty pilgrims, all singing off-key psalms and vomiting over the sides. One man swore he saw a sea monster. Another accidentally drank lamp oil. You just tried not to die. And now the sun is a hot coin pressed against your back. Jerusalem's walls are near, but you're in a holding pattern, waiting for orders, food, or divine intervention, whichever comes first. The air smells like desperation and dried figs. You check your satchel. Yep, more hard bread, less miracle. Around you, tents flap in the wind like deflated lungs. Some are patched with old undergarments. Some are literally just cloaks on sticks. And everywhere people. So many people. Ragged, chanting, praying, arguing, scratching. Mostly scratching. Crusading isn't so much a noble adventure as it is a giant, dusty camping trip gone terribly wrong. You're sharing space with French knights who smell like garlic and old wine. Italian merchants selling relics made from chicken bones, and a monk who claims he can see angels in his soup steam. Charming bunch. You learn quickly. Watch your coin purse. Don't argue with the Normans, and always, always tie your boots tight, lest someone steal them while you sleep. At night it's quieter, but not peaceful. The desert wind whistles through the camp, sounding eerily like whispers. You dream of food that isn't jerky, beds that aren't rocks and toilets that aren't just a bush and a prayer. Sometimes you wonder, is this really what God wanted? Scholars remain divided on whether the First Crusade was truly a spiritual awakening or just a sanctioned land grab cloaked in holy banners. Some say it was about reclaiming sacred ground. Others argue it was a convenient excuse to loot, murder, and escape taxes. You mostly just want clean socks. A quirky note for you. One German bishop on this very campaign insisted his wine barrel had divine protection, and when it leaked he excommunicated it. The barrel. True story, or at least that's how the guy next to you tells it while picking weevils out of his beard. And yet, despite the discomfort, the filth, and the emotional whiplash, you're still here, because something drives you. Maybe it's hope, maybe pride, maybe it's the idea that this horrible, blistering, absurd journey might mean something when it's over. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe. Invite viewers to post their location and local time. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The dust crunches beneath your feet. You take a step closer to the city. You don't know it yet, but surviving even one more day will be the hardest thing you've ever done. You wake before sunrise, not because you're eager to storm the walls of Jerusalem, but because something bit your ear in the night. Again. You slap at it groggy and slightly dazed and sit up in the pale blue-grey dawn. All around you the camp stirs like a groaning beast. People are coughing, groaning, mumbling prayers and stepping over sleeping comrades with all the grace of donkeys in chainmail. Your legs ache. Your back feels like it was folded and stored in a box overnight. You try to stretch, but the armor's not having it. It creaks and pinches and refuses to cooperate like an angry tin can wrapped around a sausage. You're already sweating. The sun isn't even up yet. Breakfast. Oh, you sweet summer child. There is no breakfast. There's something vaguely bread-like in your pouch that may once have been edible, and a few raisins so shriveled they look like sad, retired ants. You chew anyway. No one in this army eats for taste. You eat to not collapse. And today collapse would be tragically easy, because today you march. Not just you, everyone. Thousands of men, women, donkeys, oxen carts, children, and a deeply suspicious goose tied to someone's belt, all moving in a dusty, grumbling tide toward the next staging point. The real siege isn't in full swing yet, but the goal is to get into position, carry supplies, and keep morale from dying completely. Spoiler, it's already halfway there. The roads are dust and rocks and more dust. There's no shade, no fresh water, and no reliable map. You follow the crowd and hope the guy in front isn't as lost as he looks. Occasionally, someone shouts that they saw smoke in the distance, or that a Saracen scout was spotted, or that someone found cheese. Chaos follows. Your feet roar, your boots, wet from stepping in something that's probably not water. The sun climbs. It cooks your neck, bakes your helmet, and turns your vision into a watery blur. You pass a man sitting in the dirt sobbing because he dropped his wine flask. You get it. You really do. A Crusader knight passes you on horseback looking like something out of a stained glass window, shiny armor, noble nose, distant expression. Then he sneezes, loses his balance, and nearly falls off the horse. You try not to laugh. It hurts too much anyway. You keep walking. People around you sing hymns, mutter curses, or talk to themselves. You hear one woman whispering to a dried fig, calling it St. Gerald. You'd be concerned, but honestly, she's not the weirdest person here. Oh, and let's not forget the lice. You haven't felt truly clean since the Balkans. Your tunic itches constantly, your scalp feels like a crawling carnival, and the guy next to you keeps picking things out of his beard and naming them. One is Bishop Fluffy. You don't ask. As the hours drag on, you begin to hallucinate slightly. A tree looks like a chapel. A shadow looks like a soldier. A rock looks like bread. You lick it. It is not bread. Experts still debate whether the suffering endured by these crusaders was a result of divine testing, poor logistics, or sheer medieval optimism gone terribly wrong. Some historians argue that leaders underestimated the climate and geography. Others believe the suffering was part of the intended cleansing pilgrimage. The truth, probably all of the above. You're too tired to pick a side. Then at the height of the afternoon, a trumpet blares ahead. Sort of. It's more like a sick goose being stepped on. But it means stop. The caravan slows, collapses, sprawls in shade that doesn't exist. People collapse onto rocks each other, the dirt. One guy just flops down face first and stays there. Smart move. You sip what little water you have left. It tastes like regret. But hey, hydration is hydration. You don't know if there'll be more tomorrow, or even tonight. You've heard rumors of wells poisoned by defenders, or hoarded by mercenaries. Who knows? Still, you made it through the day. Barely. Just before the sun sets, someone hands you a single dried apricot and calls it God's reward. You eat it, like it's a roasted duck. Whisper 1 in the comments below if this tale charms your heart, or 2 if it sends shivers down your spine. You lie back on your bedroll, staring at a sky thick with stars. Somewhere in the distance, a crusader is playing a sad little flute, or it might be a very sad chicken. Either way, the tune is mournful enough to make even the stars seem tired. Tomorrow will be harder, but at least for now you rest, amid the stink, the noise, and the overwhelming itchiness of sanctified ambition. You wake up with your cheek pressed against something rough. It's your shield. You must have used it as a pillow. Clever maybe, except it's also covered in dried sweat, dented like a bread loaf. Someone stepped on and now your face smells like old iron and last week's stew. The sun isn't even up yet, but already the heat has begun. You sit up slowly, every joint protesting. Your back feels like someone shoved a bookshelf into it while you were sleeping. Your legs tingle from the awful mix of circulation loss and yesterday's 20-mile death march, and then you try to put on your armor. You start with the gambeson, a quilted tunic meant to protect you from chafing against your mail. It's padded, musty, and permanently damp in places you'd rather not mention. Sliding it on is like donning a wet hay bale. Then comes the mail itself, your prized hauberk. Or, in today's mood, your portable oven. Chainmail is impressive. It gleams in paintings. It whispers of valor and glory. It also weighs somewhere between 20 and 40 pounds, depending on how well fed your blacksmith was. You hoist it up, arms trembling. The first time you wore it, you nearly dislocated your shoulder. Now your muscles have adapted just enough to allow suffering in silence. It slides down over you like a curtain made of biting snakes. Every ring tugs at hair. Every fold sticks to sweaty flesh. And the smell. Oh, the smell. Iron grease body odor. Maybe a touch of fermented onion. It's not just armor, it's your own portable medieval sauna. By the time you fasten the belt and adjust your coif, you're sweating like a sinner at confession. You haven't even stood up yet. When you finally do, you feel it all at once. The weight, the heat, the loss of flexibility. You can't bend properly, your stride is shortened, and every breath feels a little tighter. You can walk, sure, but not quickly. If someone attacks, you'll have to defend yourself slowly, dramatically, and probably with a lot of wheezing. Scholars remain divided on just how common full mail was for lower-ranking Crusaders. Some believe most foot soldiers had only partial protection, if any. Others argue that mail shirts were passed down, repaired, or even looted from battlefields. You inherited this one from a cousin who survived the first 6 weeks and then got food poisoning from a questionable fig. There's a knight nearby who insists he sleeps in his armor for readiness. He also snores like a dying bull, and once set fire to his own tent, trying to light a candle while armored. No one's impressed. You shuffle out of your tent every step, a small protest against gravity. Around you, the rest of the camp is engaged in the same miserable dance, strapping, lacing, grunting, gagging. Someone's arguing over who stole their left boot. Another is crying over a broken sword handle. A third simply lies in the dirt and whispers, "Why?" Even the horses look annoyed. Then comes the helmet. Yours is a simple nasal helm, offering limited protection and even less comfort. When you slide it on, the world becomes a narrow slit. Peripheral vision, gone. Breathing difficult. Hearing muffled. It's like putting your head in a soup pot and hoping for the best. You try to drink some water. Half of it spills down your chin and into your armor. Your inner thighs are now wet. Great. Here's a fun little Crusader tidbit. Some men stuffed herbs inside their helmets to counter the smell. You try that today with a sprig of something vaguely minty. Unfortunately, it attracts bees. You learn this the hard way. Experts still debate whether the weight of armor significantly impacted Crusader tactics. Some suggest that the slow, heavy approach made sense for direct assaults. Others argue it was a logistical nightmare. You suspect both are true, especially since your tactical approach lately has been walk slowly, swing wildly, pray loudly. After some time, the order comes to move out again. You sigh, deeply. Your bones creak. Your soul groans. As you join the column, your armor clanks with each step. It's like carrying a rattling kitchen set while trying not to pass out. Someone behind you keeps stepping on your cloak. Someone ahead smells like they died last week. By midday, the sun has baked your armor into something between a griddle and a torture device. You swear you could fry an egg on your shoulder. You consider it. Food's been scarce. You begin to fantasize about breezy tunics, sandals, freedom. You envy the barefoot beggars. You miss your goat. You remember baths vaguely. Soft beds, warm bread, quiet afternoons where no one tried to stab you. You even miss that one guy in your village who talked only in chicken impressions. At least he was funny. And then with a sudden gust, your helmet lifts slightly in the breeze. You smell olives. Someone's cooking. You realize you haven't eaten anything hot in weeks. The scent is a taunt. A crusade, they said. A holy mission, they said. You didn't sign up for an endless oven. Still you march. Clank by clank, groan by groan. You make it through the day in your chainmail sauna because quitting now would mean shame, ridicule, and possibly being stabbed by your own commander. You dream of taking it off, collapsing into a puddle, and never wearing metal again. But tomorrow, you'll put it on once more. By the 4th day of marching in blistering armor, under a relentless sun, Your sense of divine purpose has withered faster than your toenails. And let's be honest, your toenails are not doing well. The group's mood is sour. Yesterday, a priest gave a fiery speech about salvation. Today, he tripped on a rock and screamed a very unholy word in Latin. No one judged him. In fact, someone applauded. You trudge beside a battered cart filled with pickaxes, wooden crosses, and an oddly shaped turnip that no one claims. A boy with a shaved head chants psalms under his breath while drawing a skull in the dirt with a stick. Morale is hanging by a thread, and that thread is soaked in sweat and irony. As you approach a hilltop overlooking Jerusalem, the commanders halt everyone for another spiritual assembly. You groan. There's no shade, and someone's burned incense that smells like goat hair and burnt raisins. Still the masses gather. The bishop, bejeweled and bleached from the sun, raises his arms theatrically. He begins, "The Lord is with us. We are his sword, his flame, his," and then someone faints. He tries again. "God's will is," and someone shouts, "Where is the water?" The bishop glares but continues. He speaks of righteous vengeance, eternal reward, and the sacred duty of reclaiming the Holy Sepulchre. You try to stay awake. Your brain is slowly cooking in your helmet. Then he says it. "We are justified by heaven to slay the enemies of Christ." You shift uncomfortably. Enemies has become a very flexible word on this journey. It used to mean Muslim armies, but over time it's stretched to include Jewish villagers, Eastern Orthodox Christians, and that one guy who sold you fake saint bones. Scholars remain divided on whether the early Crusaders truly believed in their moral mission, or simply followed power, peer pressure, and the promise of loot. Some argue many were sincere pilgrims. Others say most were opportunists in shiny armor. As usual, it's probably both. You suspect your neighbor joined for the spiritual rewards, and the goats, and then you remember Mainz. Someone mentions it quietly, a whisper among whispers. Did you hear what happened in Mainz? You nod, even though you're not sure. The story spreads like a chill in the desert heat. Back in Europe, when the Crusade first gathered momentum, certain mobs took it upon themselves to purify towns along the Rhine. Entire Jewish communities were slaughtered, homes burned, children thrown into rivers, all in the name of God. The church officially condemned it after the fact, but the damage lingered. And here, thousands of miles away, the stories still echo, weighing down your spirit, heavier than your mail shirt. A young knight standing nearby laughs about it, says something about pagan blood and cleansing fire. You turn away nauseous. Then a monk, not the mad soup one. This time a different kind leans toward you and mutters, "Holy war just means war with better press." You say nothing, but the thought roots itself deep. You remember a village you passed last week. It was quiet, peaceful. No flags, no soldiers. Just old women weaving under trees and children chasing chickens. A Crusader company passed through, and the next morning it was ash. You don't know why. No one asked. It's hard to reconcile. You're not a hero here. You're not even sure you're a good person. Tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. Still, the army moves on. The bishop finishes his speech with a dramatic blessing and flings holy water into the crowd. It mostly lands on your face. It's warm and sticky. You're 90% sure it's just wine. You mutter something unholy and resume walking. Along the path you pass makeshift graves. Some are marked with crosses, others just with rocks. The smell of decay is never far, even when the wind picks up. You keep moving because standing still is worse. Stillness means reflection, and reflection is dangerous. A man beside you sings an old French lullaby as he marches. His voice is cracked, broken but hauntingly beautiful. For a moment, the world softens. You picture home, fields, bread ovens, a day without blood, and then behind you, someone screams. A wagon has flipped, supplies everywhere. A wheel rolls past your foot like a giant lost coin. No one helps. Everyone's too tired. You're beginning to understand why most people didn't survive this experience. As the sun sets, you arrive at another ridge. Jerusalem is close now, so close you can almost smell it: dust, incense, fire, and history. You set up camp again. Another restless night awaits, full of creaking armor, whispered prayers, and haunted dreams. You lie on your back helmet beside you, eyes staring at the stars. One of them shoots across the sky. You wish not for victory, or gold, or even redemption. You wish for a bath and bread. The sun's barely risen, and already the flies are conducting a full-scale invasion of your nose. You swat them away half-heartedly, only to realize the buzzing isn't just from insects, it's also from the camp stirring. Something's different today. There's an energy in the air, a low, murmuring hum that moves through the tents like smoke. You follow the flow toward a cluster of newly arrived knights. These ones stand taller, their armor gleaming under the morning sun, their white mantles emblazoned with unmistakable red crosses. The Knights Templar have arrived. You've heard stories about them, holy warriors bound by vow, fearsome in battle, silent in prayer, secretive in, well, everything. Seeing them up close is like watching mythical beasts step out of a campfire tale. Except instead of fire and glory, it smells like sweat-wet leather and slightly fermented cheese. Romance fades fast in the Crusader camp. You're assigned temporary duty at their camp perimeter. Lucky you, which mostly involves keeping people from sneaking in to steal food relics or the knight's horses. You perch beside a Templar tent, trying not to stare, but it's hard not to. One knight is sharpening a sword in complete silence. Another is cleaning a small book with a piece of cloth, turning each page, as if it were made of angel wings. They speak little, and when they do, it's in clipped Latin, often quoting scripture or giving strict orders. One tells you to move a crate, which turns out to be full of helmets that all smell like a basilisk's armpit. You do it anyway. That's your first lesson. Templars don't ask. They command. But they're not all mystical monks in mail. Some are, well, human. One of them snores so loudly you can hear it from 3 tents over. Another spends an hour rearranging his tent flaps for better spiritual airflow. You're not even sure what that means. One more quietly mutters to himself while braiding his beard. The image of a terrifying holy knight humming and playing with his facial hair makes you oddly fond of them. The mystique fades quickly. For one thing, their food isn't any better than yours. You spot a Templar biting into a rock-hard biscuit and weeping softly. So much for divine catering. You're given a glimpse inside their chapel tent, low-ceiling candle lit with relics mounted behind a makeshift altar. A fragment of the true cross, someone says. Probably a chair leg, someone else whispers. You say nothing. Here's a quirky tidbit for you. There's a rumor, just a rumor, that some Templars wear women's stockings under their armor for warmth. You're not sure if it's true, but now you can't stop imagining it every time they solemnly march past. Scholars remain divided on whether the Templars truly followed their strict vows in full. Some documents suggest discipline, chastity, and poverty. Others hint at indulgences, secret rituals, and internal power plays. Truth is, like most things in the Crusades, it depends on who's writing the history. You help deliver messages from the Templar commander to a cluster of nobles. On the way, you get stuck behind 2 mules in a narrow pass. One mule farts, loudly. The echo rings like a trumpet. A line of knights behind you waits silently. No one says anything, but you're certain at least 3 of them are holding back laughter. You almost admire their restraint. Later that day, you help prepare the camp for an expected attack. Tents get reinforced. Spears are counted twice, and everyone sharpens something. Blades stakes their glares. You hear a Templar mutter a prayer over his sword. It sounds beautiful, ancient, terrifying. You whisper your own prayer too. It's mostly just, "Please let me not die." And just before sunset, the Templars form a line, not for battle but for evening prayer. Helmets off hands, folded eyes closed. They stand like statues. And for a brief moment it's moving. Real. Not pomp, not myth. Just tired men whispering toward the sky, hoping someone listens. You sit nearby, polishing your dented shield with a rag you're 80% sure was once a sock. You glance at the stars peeking out. Another day survived. Another night to endure. There's a comfort, strange as it sounds, in knowing you're surrounded by men more disciplined than you, more devout. Possibly more insane, but definitely committed. You don't fully understand them, but you don't have to. They'll charge first tomorrow. You'll follow, and with any luck you won't trip over your own sword. Today you are sent on an errand, not a glorious one. Not the kind that ends with banners waving and songs sung. No, you're sent to trade for a camel. Because someone decided your ragtag supply line needs a fresh beast of burden and you apparently look like a reasonable face for the job. Bad luck. You're accompanied by 2 others. A grumpy cook with a limp and a cheerful young scribe who keeps saying things like, "What an exciting opportunity for cultural exchange." You nod, but inside your gut says this is going to go terribly wrong. The local camp sits just beyond a rocky ridge. Muslim traders neutral to your war operate there under a wary truce. No swords drawn yet. Still tensions hum beneath every greeting. Their camp is quiet, methodical, shaded with colourful fabric, and smelling wonderfully of cardamom and roasted meat. It's the first pleasant smell you've encountered in weeks. A tall man in a rich blue robe meets your group. His name is Yasin. His beard is trimmed, his hands delicate, his eyes sharp. He speaks Latin well too well. You suspect he could out-negotiate half your commanders without raising his voice. He offers tea. The scribe accepts with enthusiasm. You suspiciously, but politely. The cook refuses and mumbles something about poison. You glare at him. You sit under the shade, sip the steaming drink. It's floral, slightly sweet and far too hot for the current weather. Still, it's delicious. You're halfway through your second sip when the scribe blurts out, "We'd like to trade for a camel." Yasin raises an eyebrow. "A healthy camel?" he asks, lips twitching with amusement. The cook snorts. You offer silver coins, which Yasin examines as though they were curious pebbles. He smiles politely and begins to counteroffer. The negotiation takes a turn somewhere around your second awkward attempt at explaining what exactly you're offering in return. A dented frying pan, some dried apples, a wooden icon of St. Helena with a chipped halo. Eventually, someone produces a length of cloth, possibly silk, or maybe just exceptionally clean linen, and Yasin leans in intrigued. But then disaster. The cook, grumbling to himself, opens his sack to show off an extra gift. He brought a lump of hard cheese and a boiled egg, both of which have not aged well. The smell hits the air like a holy curse. The trader recoils. The camel tied nearby lets out a very expressive grohunk sound and nearly topples its handler. You are mortified. The scribe tries to recover by complimenting Yasin's sandals. It's too late. The mood has shifted. Yasin folds his arms and speaks with a colder tone. "The camel," he says flatly, "is not for trade today." You bow, you apologize, you back away. And as you return camelless to your camp, you feel a mixture of embarrassment and weird relief. Maybe you weren't ready to handle a camel anyway. Scholars still debate how common these small, uneasy truces were between Crusaders and local merchants. Some accounts describe thriving markets and exchanges during temporary peacetimes. Others paint a picture of mistrust and violence at every corner. The truth likely lay somewhere in the space between burnt cheese and botched diplomacy. Here's a fringe detail for your memory. One Crusader chronicler described how some European knights were convinced camels were miserable dragons sent by Satan. You assume that chronicler also thought soup was witchcraft. Back at camp, you're greeted with predictable disappointment. No camel, no new pack animal. But the scribe insists cheerfully. It was a learning experience. You nod, then drop onto a blanket and stare at the sky, trying not to cry or laugh. You didn't get the camel, but you did get tea. And for one strange hour you sat under shade, sipped something warm and forgot, just briefly, that you're part of a brutal, never-ending war. And honestly, that might have been the better trade. Your lips are cracked. Your tongue feels like a strip of old leather. Your canteen is dry, and the closest thing to moisture is the sweat soaking your tunic, some of which you suspect is not entirely yours. You shuffle toward the camp's water station. Such as it is, 3 barrels, one cracked, one empty, and one guarded by a man who looks like he hasn't blinked since Antioch. Name and unit the guard demands. You give both. He squints at you, then jabs a ladle into the barrel, draws out something that resembles cloudy soup and pours it into your wooden cup. You don't ask questions. You just drink. It tastes like yesterday's foot wrappings soaked in rainwater and warmed by despair. But it's wet. That's all that matters. You're not alone. All around you, Crusaders are desperate for water. The lucky ones have managed to hoard a flask or two. The rest drink from puddles, streamlets, or when nobody's looking, dig shallow holes and pray for a miracle. There's talk of a nearby well, but also talk that it's cursed, or dry, or poisoned. Possibly all 3. You pass a group of soldiers huddled around a single clay jug, each taking a turn like it's sacred communion. One man kisses the jug after sipping. Another tries to trade half a sausage for an extra swig. You consider it for a moment, then remember the sausage has been in his belt pouch for 3 days. The desperate thirst has made some people inventive. One knight, sweating through his armor like a boiled onion, has fashioned a crude funnel from his helmet to collect dew. Another insists on sucking moisture from leaves. A third claims he knows how to divine water with a stick. You watch him wave it around for an hour. He finds nothing but 2 ants and a beetle. There's a bitter kind of camaraderie in all this. Everyone's suffering, which almost makes it easier. You swap horror stories with another foot soldier, a man from Burgundy who claims he once drank from a trough used by pigs. He shrugs and says, "It was fine. I was only sick for a week." Here's a quirky tidbit: some Crusaders reportedly drank wine or vinegar water, not out of luxury, but necessity. Alcohol helped kill bacteria. Of course, if the water was already contaminated, this only meant you'd get tipsy and sick. A double blessing. You check your rations. 1 hard biscuit and a piece of salted meat that smells like regret. Eating just makes you thirstier, but skipping meals weakens you. It's a cursed loop. You nibble anyway. You try not to imagine waterfalls, fresh rivers, or cool cups of cider, but your brain betrays you. Experts still debate the scale of water shortages during the First Crusade, especially in the siege phases. Some chronicles describe miraculous springs. Others note entire units falling ill from bad water. Modern scholars lean toward the idea that dehydration, paired with heatstroke, dysentery, and pure exhaustion, claimed more lives than swords ever did. You're starting to believe it. In desperation, a few men have wandered out into nearby hills seeking springs. One returned with a single gourd full of brownish liquid. He was hailed like a hero, then punched by a man who claimed he'd been next in line. The gourd fell. It spilled. A collective scream erupted. Even the goats looked horrified. You'd laugh, but your throat won't allow it. Later in the day, a merchant arrives in camp. He's wrapped in fine cloth trailing incense and flanked by guards. He has barrels of water, real clear water, and he's selling it by the cup. The price? Insane. A silver coin per ladle. People pay. You don't have silver, so you watch. One soldier offers his boots. Another offers a ring, supposedly from his dead father. One man just hands over his sword, saying, "I'd rather live with fists than die with a blade." Tap 3 in the comments below if this story makes you smile, or 4 if it leaves you chilled. By evening, your head is light. The sun has faded, but the heat clings to the earth like a fever. You try to conserve spit. Your lips are dry again. Your eyelids feel grainy. You dream of a well, crystal clear infinite and singing your name. You wake up licking your own sleeve. And yet tomorrow you'll do it all over again. Because crusading is as much about enduring the slow, silent battles against thirst-filled doubt as it is charging into enemy spears. For now, you clutch your empty canteen like a relic and whisper to it, "Maybe tomorrow." There's a moment each morning when you first open your eyes, and for a split second you forget where you are. You expect to hear birdsong, maybe the distant clang of your village bell, the smell of bread baking from the house next door. Instead, what you get is this: the unmistakable stench of wool cloaks soaked in old sweat, the sulphurous tang of old meat, the underlying hum of 30,000 unwashed bodies packed into a sprawling camp, like sardines blessed by a very indifferent saint. You sit up and inhale by instinct, then immediately regret it. The scent of the Crusader camp is more than just offensive, it's biblical. If smells could preach this, one would scream repentance at passing goats, and the goats would faint. Your own tunic smells like wet dog and despair. Your feet, wrapped in reused cloth, emit something that could probably qualify as a chemical weapon. You reach into your satchel to find a clean rag, and instead find another rag, one that might have been clean in Antioch. There are attempts, futile ones, at hygiene. A knight nearby rubs rosemary sprigs on his armpits. Another uses river sand to scrub his boots, which achieves precisely nothing. Someone is actually lighting incense and waving it around like a censer. It only creates spicy stink clouds that make your eyes water and adds a hint of barbecued myrrh to the overall funk. Then there's the latrine situation. You wish you didn't have to think about it, but it thinks about you at every turn of the breeze. The Crusaders dug trenches at the edge of camp, but discipline being what it is, people relieve themselves wherever seems convenient. The smell gathers at midday like a thick sermon preaching nose-first humility to anyone who dares inhale. A French knight named Guy tries to dig his own personal privy pit with a wooden spoon. He says it's for spiritual cleanliness. You ask how that's working out. He weeps softly. Here's a lesser-known tidbit. Some soldiers believed the stench of the camp would repel demons. Others thought bathing weakened the body and opened the pores to disease. Either way, washing was rare. You've seen one man bathe with wine, which everyone agreed was both sacrilegious and wasteful, though admittedly fragrant. Scholars still debate how common personal hygiene rituals were among Crusaders. While nobles might have had perfumed oils or servants to help them stay presentable, most soldiers had to choose between clean hands or preserved bread rations. Spoiler, the bread won. You decide to go for a stream scrub, a quick rinse at a muddy trickle, a few hundred yards from camp. It's barely a stream, more like a damp suggestion. Still, it's water. You kneel down, splash your face, and look at your reflection. You barely recognize yourself. Sunburned, thinner, eyes darker, dirt smudged into every crease of your skin like an old fresco flaking off a chapel wall. As you try to wash your armpits, two things happen. Your foot slips and you land in the water. All of it, face first. You emerge sputtering, soaked in glory and questionable minerals. A nearby soldier claps slowly. A horse snorts with judgment. And so, soaked and muddied, but briefly cooler, you return to camp. Someone asks if you were attacked by a bog spirit. You nod solemnly. Yes, you say. It was vicious. It smelled like me. That night, after another dinner of dried lentils and stale bread, you lie on your back, staring at the night sky. You can smell yourself, even with your nose half blocked. You're afraid to remove your boots for fear of releasing an ancient curse. But oddly, you're used to it now. The stink, the grime, the itchy cloak clinging to your skin like a damp memory, it's all part of the rhythm. Crusading isn't about cleanliness, it's about survival. And sometimes survival means sleeping in a puddle of your own sweat, with a mouldy biscuit under your head. You smile. A little, because tonight the wind is blowing away from you. Small victories. You wake in the dark cold, and stiff your back sore from sleeping half on a rock and half on a rolled-up banner someone mistook for a blanket. Your nose, blessedly, is too numb to register much of anything until a breeze shifts, and you get a full lungful of what can only be described as armpit stew. The camp is already murmuring with movement. Today is no ordinary day. Today you're assigned to trench duty. Trench duty, the glamorous Crusader task of digging shallow ditches in the hard, dry earth outside Jerusalem's walls, part of the endless siege works surrounding the city. You and dozens of others are given spades, picks, and for some unlucky few spoons, you draw a pickaxe. Lucky you. The terrain is cruel, sun-baked clay riddled with pebbles that deflect tools, sending splinters flying. Your hands blister within minutes. The handle rubs against your palms with the familiarity of an enemy's handshake. You've barely made a dent when arrows start flying. The city's defenders have spotted your team and decided to provide encouragement. You duck instinctively, but a man next to you isn't fast enough. He lets out a wheeze and collapses. You glance at the shaft in his shoulder. Not dead. Not yet. Two stretcher bearers scramble to retrieve him. No one else stops digging, and so you keep working. The trench must grow, deeper, wider. It's your only cover. You scoop and swing, sweat dripping down your back and pooling at the bottom of your boots. Later in the day, you're allowed a short break. You sit behind a battered shield and munch on dried figs. They taste like sawdust and sadness. You offer one to the soldier next to you. He declines, staring out toward the city walls, with a blank, tired expression. They'll burn us before they surrender, he mutters. You nod, but say nothing. He's probably right. Siege life is many things, but noble isn't one of them. Forget the tales of brave charges and shining banners. The real work happens in the dirt. You dig, you duck, you suffer from cramps in places you didn't know existed. One man claims he pulled a muscle in his eyelid. You're not sure how that works, but his face definitely looks like it's in pain. You hear that another team tried to roll a siege tower up the hill today. It tipped over and crushed 2 oxen. They say the oxen were the lucky ones. Here's a quirky footnote for your nightmares in one siege. Desperate soldiers reportedly used the bodies of fallen comrades to fill trench gaps and reinforce siege ramps. You try not to look too hard at the lumps along the outer edge of your ditch. Not all of them are rocks. Scholars remain divided on the effectiveness of these siege tactics. Some claim the Crusaders' persistence wore down Jerusalem's defenses. Others argue the defenders were simply outnumbered and undersupplied. The truth is probably buried beneath layers of bone dust and dried blood. At one point, a man yells, "Incoming!" and everyone flattens. A catapult launches a rock from behind the walls. It soars, it spins it, lands 40 feet wide of anything important. You all look at each other, shrug, and go back to digging. Close only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades, not medieval masonry. By dusk, the trench is longer, deeper, still not enough. You return to camp, covered in dirt, sweat, and a thin layer of defeat. Your arms tremble. Your neck creaks when you turn it. You can't feel your toes, or maybe they've decided to quit and form their own independent kingdom. Dinner is thin soup, made from something that might once have been a turnip, or a sock. You eat it anyway. As the stars emerge, you sit near the fire, quietly scraping dried mud off your hands with the edge of your blade. You don't speak. Neither does anyone else. The silence isn't sacred. It's exhaustion, plain and hollow. The siege continues tomorrow. So do you. Because that's what crusading really is. Not glory, not honor, not the shining blade of righteousness. Just you. In a trench. With a pickaxe. You're summoned at dawn. A runner shouts your name. Well, something that sounds vaguely like your name. And you stumble out of your tent, half-armored, one boot on the other in your hand. You're going to meet the Emperor, he says with the casual flair of someone announcing a trip to the local bakery. The Emperor. Not just any emperor. The Byzantine Emperor Alexios Komnenos, ruler of Constantinople, heir of Rome, and allegedly the reason half of this crusade started in the first place. It was his plea for help against the Seljuks that led to Pope Urban II lighting the religious powder keg back in France. And now, months and thousands of miles later, you've somehow been tapped to represent your unit for an audience. Your immediate response is, "Why me?" No one answers. You throw on your best tunic, not your cleanest, just the least moth-eaten, and follow the runner toward a tent lined with silks and guarded by intimidating men in lamella armor. Their helms glint, their beards are immaculately oiled, and they eye you like a walking scab. Inside, the atmosphere shifts. The tent is cool, perfumed, and lit with hanging brass lamps. A harp plays somewhere, and there's an honest-to-God bowl of fresh fruit on a table. Real fruit, not dried, not preserved in oil. You spot a pear, and almost weep. Then he enters. Emperor Alexios isn't what you expected. There's no golden halo, no ethereal glow, no choir. He's shorter than you thought. Older, wearing robes that shimmer like fish scales and sandals too clean for this world. He walks with the confidence of someone who has never dug a latrine in his life. His eyes are sharp, calculating. This man could probably tell how many coins are in your pocket just by looking at your shoes. He doesn't speak right away. He just observes. You bow awkwardly. So do the others. A translator begins relaying questions. Where is your unit stationed? How are supplies? Are morale and discipline holding? The questions are delivered politely, but beneath them lies a current of irritation, like a landlord checking on an unruly band of tenants who've been throwing parties and ruining the drapes. Because that's what the Western Crusaders are to Alexios, unpredictable guests. Useful, but risky. He offers you a token, an emblem on a red ribbon, and a quiet reminder to keep your men in line. You nod, deeply confused. You're not even sure you're technically in charge of anyone. Then the real treat, a small dish of dates and almonds passed around the room. You eat slowly, reverently. It's the best thing you've had in months. And just like that, the meeting ends. You shuffle out, trying not to trip on the carpet. One of the guards whispers, "Don't stare at his sandals." Too late. Here's a quirky historical tidbit. Some Latin crusaders were stunned by the wealth and refinement of the Byzantines. One Frank reportedly thought silk was woven from moonlight and beetle wings. Another tried to eat a perfumed candle, thinking it was dessert. Scholars remain divided on how much support Alexios actually gave to the First Crusade. Some claim he provided crucial supplies and reinforcements. Others accuse him of backstabbing, withholding aid, or playing politics while the Franks suffered. The truth is probably in between, complex, opportunistic, and shaped by the emperor's desire to defend his empire, not save someone else's holy land. You return to camp with sticky fingers and a strange sense of awe. Not at the emperor, really, but at the contrast. One minute you're sleeping in mud with rats nibbling your belt, and the next you're sipping spiced wine in a room with a man who owns books, plural, in color. Your friends gather around you like you've returned from a vision. What was he like, someone asks. You shrug. Smelled like cinnamon, you reply. That night you stare at the stars again. You think about power, about how some men wear silk while others bleed into sand, about how one man's letter sparked this chaos, and now you're here thousands of miles from home with a sore back, no horse, and a stolen spoon in your satchel. You're not sure if the Emperor is a savior, a coward, or just another man trying to survive his own kind of siege. But you know one thing, he definitely doesn't sleep in chainmail. The catapult is majestic. In theory, it stands like a proud wooden beast on the hilltop ropes. Taut arms extended a basket the size of a wine barrel, loaded with a jagged chunk of limestone. You squint up at it, hands on hips, trying to pretend you understand how it works. You don't. No one does, really. Except maybe the man in charge, a sweaty engineer from Genoa, who only speaks in curses and gestures. This morning you've been assigned to the catapult crew. Apparently someone thought your back looked sturdy enough to haul ammunition uphill in the sun. Again, bad luck. Your first task is to help wind the crank. Sounds easy until you realize it takes 6 men and 15 minutes to do one pull. It's like trying to wrestle a windmill using only elbow grease and good intentions. You haul strained sweat through your socks, and finally, the giant arm creaks into position. The engineer nods, mutters something about trajectory and motions for the shot. The rock is placed with great reverence, like a sacred melon about to be sacrificed. Everyone stands back. Then comes the countdown Tre du uno, and the arm releases with a violent thwack. The rock soars, magnificently, into the sky, spins, twirls, and lands squarely on your camp's laundry tent. There is a long silence. Then a distant muffled yell, followed by the sight of someone emerging from the wreckage, holding what was once a blanket now, a pile of shredded threads. No one speaks. The Genoese engineer stares at the horizon like a man questioning all his life choices. You consider disappearing into the dirt. Still, the work continues. More rocks, more cranking. You're sweating from your eyelashes. You can't tell if the next projectile is aimed at the walls of Jerusalem or at a passing bird. Accuracy is, not the Crusader's strong suit. One of the guys in your crew starts naming the rocks before launch. This one's for the sausage thief, he says. This one's for my mother-in-law. You begin to like him. Here's a weird little tidbit: some medieval besiegers launched, well, let's just say non-rock items over city walls. Corpses, diseased animals, and once, according to one chronicler, a barrel full of fleas. Whether that actually happened, or was just poetic vengeance. The jury's out, but it makes you itch just thinking about it. Scholars remain divided on the effectiveness of Crusader siege engines. Some argue they were too few and too crudely built to pose serious threats. Others believe they were essential to morale, if not precision. After all, nothing says we mean business like launching a flaming goat into someone's courtyard. Speaking of flaming things, later in the afternoon someone suggests adding pitch to the next load. Make it dramatic, they say. You stand well back as the team soaks a bundle of timber, scraps and kindling in black tar, ties it up with rope lights, it on fire, and sends it skyward. It arcs, hissing, glowing, beautiful in the light. It also overshoots the wall and lands somewhere near a grove of olive trees. 5 minutes later, smoke begins to rise. Someone yells, "That wasn't even enemy territory." You all watch it burn in stunned silence. Eventually, a small group of defenders emerges on the wall. One holds a sign you can't read, but the way he gestures tells you everything. You've been mocked. You head back to camp, shoulders, aching arms, limp spirits somewhere near your knees. You didn't break the walls today. You broke laundry olive groves and probably a few international laws. Dinner is gruel. Again, you eat it without tasting, distracted by the memory of that perfect arc in the sky and the crashing thud of failure. As night falls, you lie on your back, watching stars pass slowly above. Somewhere a rat chews a hole in your pack. A dog barks. A distant scream echoes. And yet, you dream of catapults. And maybe, just maybe, aiming them better next time. The monk appears at dawn. He's barefoot, wild-eyed, wrapped in a filthy wool robe that looks like it lost a fight with a badger. His beard has braided itself. His eyes shine with the fervor of someone who hasn't slept in several days and doesn't plan to anytime soon. He drags a wooden cross behind him, leaving a crooked trench in the dirt as he walks. He shouts, No, not just shouts, declares. Bellows. The day is upon us, he cries. The Lord rides with thunder. Repent ye worms. Most people just blink and try to go back to chewing their morning biscuits. A few nod solemnly because, well, the crusade has made strange behavior seem almost reasonable. But others gather. Always the crowd. Always the need to believe in something even if it smells like fermented celery. You watch as the monk climbs a barrel, holds his arms aloft and begins prophesying in Old Latin, which he switches mid-sentence with garbled French and something that might be Pig Latin or the language of ghosts. His message is clear enough. The end is nigh. God is coming. And he is not impressed. You sip your gritty tea. A handful of soldiers cheer. One throws off his boots and runs around the camp, shouting that he's now walking the holy path. Another begins sobbing uncontrollably into a turnip. You sigh. It's going to be one of those days. The monk continues now, foaming slightly. He warns that Jerusalem will fall, but not by siege, by fire from the sky, and the righteous will ascend in a chariot made of bones. Only the pure will float, he screams. The rest shall sink like meat in broth. You look down at your muddy feet. You're probably not floating. Crusade camps were no strangers to zealots. Here's a quirky tidbit. During the First Crusade, some preachers wandered from camp to camp, declaring visions of angels, talking animals and rivers that flowed with milk and honey. Some of these prophets gained followings. Others were tied to trees until the visions passed. Scholars still debate the sincerity of these figures. Were they true believers mad from heat and hunger, or opportunists feeding off fear? Most likely a rich mixture of all three. Add a pinch of head trauma and a dash of starvation, and boom, homemade prophet. This particular monk begins spinning in circles, howling about a flaming sword descending from the clouds. A group of onlookers joins him spinning until one collapses and vomits onto a helmet. Spiritual enlightenment achieved, and then it gets worse. He points at you. That one, he shouts. That one carries the mark. You look around. Surely he means someone else. He hops off the barrel and rushes toward you. You brace for impact, but he stops short, lays a hand on your forehead, and declares, "Thou art both shadow and light." It's honestly a little flattering. A Templar nearby steps in, gripping the monk's wrist and saying something very stern in Latin. The monk flails, hisses, and runs off into the brush, dragging his cross like a demented wheelbarrow. The crowd murmurs. Someone starts praying again. Another shouts. The goat was right and collapses. You slowly back away. Later that day, someone paints a crude angel on their tent. Another ties chicken bones around their neck for protection. Your tent mate burns rosemary and mutters, "Just in case." You don't ask. By sunset, the monk returns, this time covered in mud. Dragging a large beetroot, he claims, is the earthly vessel of St. Michael. The commanders finally intervene. He's tied gently but firmly to a post near the kitchens. There, he preaches to the turnips and sings to a spoon. You bring him water. He smiles at you, blesses your boots, and whispers, "Beware the soup." That night, your dreams are filled with flames, floating saints, and very angry vegetables. You wake, check your boots for curses, and sigh. Another day in paradise. Today you are reminded that the so-called code of chivalry is less of a code and more of a very optional suggestion. It starts with a knight, a real one with a polished crest, a shimmering surcoat, and a horse that's probably better fed than half the camp. He rides in from the west like he's late for a ballad, trailing servants' banners, and an attitude so inflated you can practically hear it creaking. You're on water hauling duty again, so you pass him while lugging 2 sloshing buckets up a hill. He glances at you as if you were a stray turnip. Then, without a word, he nudges his horse into your path, splashing half your water into the dirt. You stare. He doesn't apologize. He doesn't even see you. So much for honor. The romantic idea of noble knights, the kind you imagined as a child, is fading fast. Most of them are little more than armored landlords with fancy titles and worse manners. They yell at squires, cut in food lines, and borrow anything not nailed down. One commandeered a tent from a sick monk. Another demanded a local merchant donate his finest shoes, which were too small anyway. A squire tells you privately that his master hasn't bathed in over a month, and once mistook a goat for a herald. Still, the squire says he prays well. You're unconvinced. Later, you witness a duel, or rather a drunken brawl, with swords between 2 knights. arguing over whose banner is more righteous. One shouts, "My lineage dates to Charlemagne." The other yells, "Your lineage eats mud." Steel clashes. Everyone gathers. One knight trips over a tent rope, the other accidentally stabs a cooking pot. The fight ends when both fall down and can't get back up because of their armor. You're pretty sure that's not how it goes in the songs. Here's a quirky historical note. While chivalry was often preached, actual knightly behavior during the Crusades leaned more toward pillaging, infighting, and squabbling over loot. Some chroniclers tried to spin their actions into virtue, but others, especially those writing years later, openly called out the hypocrisy. Scholars remain divided on how seriously knights took their oaths of conduct. While a few lived by rigid codes, many bent the rules whenever it suited their pride or profit. After all, shiny armor doesn't make a clean conscience. That afternoon you hear news of a village nearby, neutral, peaceful, untouched. Or at least it was. A troop of Christian warriors passed through and decided to help themselves to food wine and a few sheep. When questioned, they said the villagers were probably secret pagans. Convenient, isn't it? You sit on a rock cleaning mud from your boots and watch one of the knights ride by humming to himself while polishing a stolen goblet. You wonder if he's the hero of his own story, or just another villain in someone else's. Later that evening you help patch a shield for a soldier who still believes in honor. He tells you about a knight who once saved a child from a burning chapel. You want to believe it. Maybe those knights exist. Maybe they're just very, very rare. Your own commander is decent, cranky, tired, smelly, but fair. He doesn't steal bread. He says please. You decide that counts for something. As you fall asleep that night, curled beside your pack, you think of all the stories you once believed about justice, valor, glory. Now they smell a lot like horse sweat and hypocrisy. But still, you hold on to the hope that somewhere out there between the mud and the mess, someone is actually doing the right thing. You wake to fog. Not just mist, but a heavy, silent fog that clings to the camp like an omen. The usual noises, snoring, grumbling, someone arguing with a tent pole, are hushed, muffled by the eerie stillness. Even the animals seem subdued. A donkey coughs once, then retreats into its blanket. Your breath comes out in pale clouds. The sun tries to break through, but can't quite manage it, casting only a ghostly glow across the tents and trenches. It feels like the whole world has been buried in ash. Word spreads Antioch. The name whispers through the camp like smoke through cracks. The older soldiers stiffen when they hear it. The younger ones ask, "What's so special about Antioch?" You soon learn the stories. Months before you arrived here, during the long and grueling siege of Antioch, something happened. Soldiers who survived don't always agree on what. Some speak of miraculous visions, others of madness. Everyone agrees something changed there. You find yourself on scouting detail today, lucky again, and are sent with a small team to clear brush near a ruined olive grove just outside the city walls. A knight who fought at Antioch comes with you. His name is Bernard. He doesn't say much, but when he does, he speaks with a distant look in his eyes, like he's still somewhere else. As you hack through dry branches, Bernard suddenly stops. "This is like that night," he murmurs. You ask what he means. The night the voices started. He kneels and points to the soil. Ground was the same. Quiet. Too quiet. You look around. It is quiet. Your breath catches. Then you hear it. A whisper. Not words. Not even sound, really. More like a sensation, a vibration behind your ears. You freeze. The others pause, sensing it too. Bernard closes his eyes. "They told us where to dig," he says. You frown. Who? He opens his eyes. Saints. Back at Antioch, he explains a starving crusader named Peter Bartholomew claimed to have received a divine vision, revealing the location of the Holy Lance, the spear that pierced Christ's side. Driven by desperation, the soldiers dug in a chapel. After hours of toil, they unearthed something, a rusty iron point. Some said it was fake, others swore it glowed. That night, the army, inspired by the miracle, launched a suicidal charge and somehow won. Scholars remain divided on whether Peter truly experienced divine visions or simply fabricated them to boost morale. Some called him a prophet, others called him a fraud. A year later, to prove his holiness, he walked barefoot through fire and died of his burns. So, take from that what you will. You try to laugh off Bernard's story, but it lingers. As you continue working, you find yourself glancing over your shoulder. The fog doesn't lift. The shadows in the olive grove seem longer than they should be. At one point, you spot what looks like a cloaked figure by the trees. You blink. It's gone. The men say nothing, but no one strays from the group. Later, back in camp, you overhear hushed talk. A soldier saw a woman in white, standing by the grave mounds. Another says he heard chanting from the empty chapel. You know it could be stress, exhaustion, heat stroke, or something else entirely. Crusaders are not short on ghosts. Here's a fringe detail for your anxious brain. Some units believed in battle saints who physically appeared during battle fighting alongside them. St. George, St. Demetrius, even the Archangel Michael. Whether hallucination or mass delusion, enough people believed, and belief can be terrifyingly powerful. That night, fog still hangs over the camp. You sleep lightly wrapped in every cloth you own. Your sword close your ears, tuned to every shift of wind. You dream of the chapel at Antioch, of digging endlessly into hard ground, pulling up not relics but bones. So many bones. You wake before dawn, cold, stiff, and not entirely sure whether the dream ever ended. In the pale light, you spot Bernard, staring at the horizon, lips moving silently. He catches your eye. "They're watching again," he says. You don't ask who. You just nod, wrap your cloak tighter, and try to remember whether ghosts prefer silence or songs. You've been stabbed. Not by a sword, not by an arrow. No, this is worse. You've been stabbed by a splinter the size of a small twig, and it's now lodged somewhere between your thumb and your pride. It happened while lifting a broken cartwheel, and now your hand is red, swollen, and throbbing like a badly played drum. You try to ignore it. You fail. By mid-afternoon, your entire arm aches. The skin around the wound is hot. Your fingers twitch involuntarily. And, worst of all, you're beginning to smell something off. So you make the most dangerous decision of all. You seek medical attention. You find the healer's tent between the trench line and the latrine zone, a perfect location if you're aiming for irony. The healer himself is a wiry man named Brother Theobald, who appears to be part monk, part herbalist, and part enthusiastic torturer. He greets you with the usual warmth strip. You hesitate. Just the arm, you clarify. He grunts and pulls out a cloth roll filled with terrifying tools, hooked needles, iron tongs, something that looks like it once belonged to a fireplace. He pokes your hand once, then twice, then sniffs it. "Putrescence," he says, smiling as if announcing a birthday. "Good timing." He pours vinegar directly onto the wound. "You scream in a way that's not very knightly," he says. "That's good. It means your humours are still lively." Then comes the knife. No anesthesia, of course. Just a wad of cloth to bite, and a whispered prayer that sounds suspiciously like "Lord, guide my shaky hand." You clench every muscle you own. The cutting takes seconds. The pain lasts minutes. You hear yourself groaning like a cursed bellows. At one point you see stars. At another you briefly mistake Brother Theobald for your mother. You apologize. Once the splinter is removed, he sprinkles ground rosemary over the wound, mutters another prayer, and wraps it tightly in linen. "Don't use the hand for 3 days," he says. "Or 6. Or ever. Depending." He offers you a sip of wine as a reward. It tastes like vinegar, too. Here's a quirky detail. Medieval medicine, especially on Crusades, relied heavily on folk remedies, herbal lore, and a belief in balancing bodily humours. If your leg hurt, it was a problem of bile. If you fainted, your phlegm was uncooperative. If you had nightmares, clearly your spleen was being moody. Scholars remain divided on how effective battlefield treatments were during the Crusades. Some accounts suggest skilled healers managed to save lives. Others describe horrific infection rates and mortality from even minor wounds. Amputations were common. So were maggot infestations. You try not to think about it. As you leave the tent wobbly wrapped and utterly traumatized, you pass a man being treated for an arrow wound to the thigh. The arrow is still in there. The healer offers him a spoon to bite. You quicken your pace. Later you show your bandage to your tent mates. One claims it's cursed and suggests rubbing it with garlic. Another offers to pee on it for luck. You politely decline both. The wound throbs through the night. You cradle it like a baby bird, afraid to move too suddenly. Your dreams are a haze of boiling vinegar, glowing herbs, and someone shouting more leeches. And through it all, you begin to understand something strange. Pain on this crusade isn't exceptional. It's the norm. What's unusual is surviving it. The thing no one tells you about war is how much time you spend waiting. You picture crusading as a flurry of charging knights, flapping banners, dramatic speeches, and swords, catching sunlight as choirs sing in the background. Reality. It's sitting on a rock for 4 hours, gnawing on stale bread and trying not to die of boredom or fleas. Your hand still aches from yesterday's medical procedure, so you're excused from digging today. Instead, you're posted on watch duty near the edge of camp, which means you squint at distant rocks, and you pretend those aren't just goats with excellent camouflage. The wind whistles across the hills. The sun creeps higher. Your tunic sticks to you in all the wrong places. Occasionally someone walks past you and nods like you're doing something noble. You're not. You're basically a human scarecrow. Nearby, a pair of Crusaders plays dice with carved bones. One accuses the other of cheating. A mild scuffle breaks out, resolved when someone throws a boot at both of them. Peace is restored. The boot is not returned. You wander around camp after your shift looking for something, anything to do. A tent near yours has organized a chess tournament, using rocks and bent nails. You watch for a bit until someone flips the board because that pawn looked at me wrong. You try to write in your travel journal, which is really just a bundle of stitched-together parchment you found outside Antioch. Your ink is dried up, so you use charcoal. The resulting page reads something like, hot, hungry, smell worse than yesterday, no idea what day it is. Possibly Tuesday. Or always Tuesday. You fold it up. Future generations won't be impressed. Dinner is early tonight. A stew made from questionable legumes and something that might once have been a bird. You don't ask. You just chew and hope it's not looking back. One of the camp entertainers, a former juggler turned holy fool, attempts to balance a dagger on his nose. He fails. The dagger lands in a pot. Everyone applauds. This is the most exciting thing that's happened in 2 days. Here's your quirky detail for the evening. Some Crusader camps employed wandering minstrels or jesters, not just for morale but to spread coded messages between commanders. One minstrel was reportedly arrested for delivering a message, disguised as a bad pun, about St. Peter's sandals. Scholars remain divided on how much downtime Crusaders actually had. Some sources describe endless labor and preparation. Others paint stretches of idleness, where men grew restless, paranoid, and increasingly superstitious. Given your own experience, both seem accurate. You overhear 2 men debating theology while throwing pebbles at a rat. One argues God wants them to conquer Jerusalem. The other insists it's a test to make them humble. The rat escapes. Neither man wins. Your tent mate spends the evening making a crude lute from a broken bow and some horsehair. It sounds like a goat being tickled, but you nod encouragingly. He offers to name a song after you. You decline. Night falls. The stars come out. And you find yourself lying awake, staring up at the sky, wondering how much longer this all will last. Days, weeks, eternity. You don't miss the fighting. You miss the purpose, or at least the illusion of it. Marching somewhere, doing something. This waiting, it eats you. Not like hunger, more like rust. Your foot itches. You don't scratch it. You suspect it's psychological. Or fleas. Eventually you drift off. No dreams. Just the slow churn of a mind desperate for movement and trapped in stillness. Maybe tomorrow someone will fall off a horse again. That was fun last time. You're woken by shouting. Not the usual someone stole my biscuit or that's my tent you pig kind of shouting. This is sharper, colder. Accusatory. You crawl out of your blanket, rubbing your eyes, and stumble into a growing circle of onlookers. In the center, a man kneels. His hands are tied. His robes are dusty and torn, and there's a smear of blood on his cheek. He's not a soldier. He's a scholar. A former monk, if the remains of his shaved tonsure are anything to go by. The man shouting at him is a high-ranking priest, red-faced and trembling with fury. He has denied the truth, the priest bellows. He claims Christ was only a prophet. Gasps ripple through the crowd. You hear whispers, heretic, blasphemer, possessed. Someone crosses themselves. Someone else spits. You squint at the accused man. He doesn't look evil. He looks tired. His mouth moves quietly, repeating something you can't hear. A prayer, a defense, a final confession. The trial begins without warning. There's no official court, no defense counsel, no parchment record. Just fire in the eyes of the accusers and silence from the condemned. He'd been caught speaking to a Muslim trader outside the camp, they say. Not arguing, not debating, just speaking. The trader had offered him a copy of the Quran. He had accepted it. A mistake. The bishop's assistant reads from a scroll something about apostasy and eternal fire. No one listens too closely. The crowd wants blood, or at least a show. You feel sick. Scholars remain divided on how widespread religious persecution was within Crusader ranks themselves. Some argue that fanaticism was an occasional flare sparked by stress and fear. Others contend that the Crusades bred an environment where suspicion and violence toward the impure became normalized. The evidence suggests both were true, depending on the mood of the mob. The priest finishes his speech. He will burn at dawn, he says, for his soul's purification. A murmur of approval rolls through the crowd. You back away. You're no theologian. You don't know the nuances of doctrine. But something about this feels wrong. The scholar didn't preach sedition. He didn't call for betrayal. He accepted a book. He listened. And now he'll burn. Later that night your tent is silent. Your tent mate pretends to sleep. You can hear his breath catch. You know he was once a student at a monastery too. You wonder what he's thinking. You lie awake listening to the night wind stir the tents. Here's your quirky tidbit though. It feels less funny today. Some Crusaders believed that reading non-Christian texts, even if they didn't understand them, could corrupt the soul through the eyes. One man reportedly gouged out a companion's eye after catching him looking at Arabic poetry. You want to laugh. You don't. At dawn you wake to smoke. You don't go to the execution. Most people do. You stay in your tent and stare at the floor. You think of home, of libraries, of the one friar in your village who believed books. All books were gifts waiting to be read, not feared. You wonder what happened to him. That night the smoke still lingers. It clings to your clothes, your hair, your thoughts. You whisper a prayer not for victory, not for glory, just for peace and for fewer flames. The relic seller arrives just before midday. You spot him near the southern edge of the camp, under a torn canopy, seated on a red cushion surrounded by a series of carved boxes, sacks, and the unmistakable scent of beeswax and dried thyme. His banner flaps lazily in the breeze, a gold chalice on a black background, and beneath it the words, "Authentic holy relics, guaranteed or may God smite me." Well then, you're not proud of it, but curiosity wins. You step closer, pretending to examine a cracked helmet in the adjacent gear stall while your eyes drift toward the seller's goods. His voice is calm, measured with the lilting charm of someone who knows how to sell snake oil, without actually saying it's snake oil. Here he says to a group of wide-eyed soldiers, the left molar of Saint Sebastian, still tinged with divine pain. 20 coins. Someone gasps. Another fumbles for a pouch. He opens another box. A strip of cloth, blessed by the Virgin herself, supposedly found during the siege of Antioch. Still fragrant, he insists. You're not sure if it's divine essence or goat sweat, but it certainly smells like something. You keep watching, and before you know it, you're in line. You're not even sure why. Boredom, hope. The strange need to own something sacred to balance the filth and fear around you. When it's your turn, the seller eyes you with a practiced smile. Pilgrim, he says, you look like one in need of strength. Might I offer? He opens a velvet pouch, a fragment of St. Bartholomew's sandal, still bearing the impression of his blessed toe. It's a very small brownish scrap. You squint. Then he produces something else, or perhaps something rarer. This, he says, lifting a tiny jar, is the preserved breath of St. Paul trapped in a vial after a particularly spirited sermon. You blink. You almost ask how one bottles a breath. Then you remember where you are. You don't ask. You settle on something simpler, a small yellowed nail supposedly from Noah's Ark. The seller assures you it still contains ark essence. You don't know what that means. He wraps it carefully and accepts your 2 copper coins. You walk away holding the nail like it's made of gold. You tell yourself it's just for luck. A little charm to keep you safe, nothing more. A knight passes you holding a shinbone he swears is from St. Jerome. He waves it like a sword and declares he is now invincible. 30 minutes later he trips on a tent rope and lands in a barrel of pickled onions. You decide not to test your nail's powers just yet. Here's a wonderfully strange detail during the Crusades. The relic trade exploded. Some relics were revered splinters from the true cross vials of martyr blood. Others were obviously fake multiple skulls of the same saint feathers from the angel Gabriel, and one enterprising merchant who tried to sell a tear wept by Eve. Scholars still debate how many relics were believed sincerely versus used as tools of morale and manipulation. Some argue that the church turned a blind eye, knowing that belief, real or not, could galvanize troops. Others suggest many sellers honestly believed in the authenticity of their wares, having inherited them through a game of historical telephone spanning centuries. Later, back at your tent, you examine the nail again. You don't feel any stronger. But somehow holding it makes you feel a little less alone. That night, you dream of relics. You walk through a foggy cathedral made of bones, where every candle is a saint's finger and every pew a carved-out ribcage. Your nail glows faintly. You wake with your fingers still curled around it, sweaty and stiff. Outside, someone is coughing. Someone else is singing. The camp breathes on, tired and tattered. You tuck the nail into your satchel next to your crust of bread and your fraying map. Because fake or not, you need something to believe in. You really should have kept your mouth shut. It started innocently well, almost. You were in line for the stew pot, listening to two overly loud knights, arguing about which saint was more powerful. Saint George or Saint Denis. You, with the fatigue of a man who hasn't had a proper bowel movement in a week and half a blister on your tongue, muttered they'd both lose to Saint Flatulence. Unfortunately, the priest behind you heard. He didn't laugh. He didn't even scowl. He simply stared long and hard, like you'd just spit in the communion cup. An hour later, you were summoned. And now you're here kneeling awkwardly on a cold mat before a tribunal of clerics and grim-looking nobles. The makeshift trial tent smells like wax-old robes and judgment. A brazier smoulders in the corner. The priest who overheard you reads from a scroll, his voice stern and dramatic. He did mock the blessed saints in front of men, women, and the divine presence. You try to protest. It was a joke, you say. A bad one. They do not laugh. They ask you questions. Did you mean it? Do you reject the teachings of the church? Do you believe in the holiness of the saints? You nod so fast your neck cracks. One cleric wants to fine you 5 silver coins. Another wants you whipped. A third calmly suggests execution. To discourage heresy, he says, with the same tone one might use when recommending goat stew. Eventually, someone more reasonable suggests penance 3 days without food, public prayer, and latrine duty. You accept gratefully. You begin to understand how thin the ice is here, how close this entire crusade teeters between faith and fanaticism. You weren't burned, but you could have been. Easily. Here's a chilling tidbit in some Crusader camps. Blasphemy, even joking blasphemy, was treated as a serious crime. Accusations could come from anyone, and trials were often little more than theatre. The threat of punishment was real, and often disproportionate. Scholars remain divided on whether these punishments were driven by sincere belief or fear of divine retribution during such a holy mission. Some argue the church used fear to maintain order. Others say the fear ran both ways, that priests themselves dreaded being seen as soft on heresy. Your public penance begins at dusk. You're made to stand outside the main tent, arms outstretched, reciting psalms while your knees ache and your stomach growls. Passers-by watch with varied expressions, pity, amusement, indifference. One man throws you a crust of bread. It misses and hits your ear. The second night you overhear 2 soldiers debating whether you were possessed. One suggests a minor demon of sarcasm. The other claims you were cursed by bad stew. Honestly, it might be both. On the 3rd day during latrine duty, you find yourself cleaning out a trench with a wooden paddle and a strong desire to time travel backward and not make that joke. Here's a fun fringe fact. One Crusader chronicler described a soldier punished for impersonating St. Peter's donkey, not riding it, being it, full braze and all. The man was flogged, then made to wear donkey ears for a week. You consider yourself lucky. When your penance ends, the priest offers you absolution with a pinch of ash and a warning. Your tongue is clever, but salvation prefers silence. You nod, smiling sheepishly, and whisper, "Yes, Father." Then you immediately regret adding, "And I'll keep my jokes holier than thou." He stares again. You freeze. Luckily this time he sighs and walks away. That night you lie on your blanket, staring up at the stars, clutching your bruised pride and your not-so-holy nail. You've learned something. The fire is hot, the line is thin, and jokes are dangerous. But still, sometimes in a place like this, if you don't laugh, you might just go mad. Today's the day you joust. Not because you volunteered, of course. No, you were volunteered by your commander, who looked you over this morning and said, "You're the least injured. You'll do." which is a very low bar considering the competition includes a man with a melted ear and another who's convinced he's been cursed by cheese. You try to protest. I don't know how to joust. He shrugs. Just aim the stick and hold on. Helpful. So now here you are standing beside a borrowed horse that looks almost as nervous as you. The saddle is too wide, the reins frayed, and your lance appears to be a broom handle with ideas above its station. You slide on your helmet, vision gone, breathing restricted, confidence non-existent. Across the field, your opponent adjusts his armor with the assistance of 2 squires and 1 priest. He's a proper knight, tall, shiny stern. His horse has a braided mane. His lance has ribbons. Ribbons. You hate him already. A crowd gathers. Most are here for entertainment. A few are here to gamble. 1 monk is chanting psalms, probably for your soul. The herald raises a hand. On my mark, your heart tries to escape your chest. Your horse tries to walk sideways. You consider throwing yourself off and faking a leg injury, but before you can move, your steed lurches forward. You wobble in the saddle like a sack of potatoes tied to a wine barrel. You lower the lance, squinting through your helmet slit, aiming vaguely at the gleaming blur charging toward you. Then clang. You see stars. Not metaphorically, actual stars. The impact knocks the air out of your lungs. You don't fall, but you do drop your lance and immediately lose all control of your horse, who decides now is a perfect time to trot directly into the stew tent. People scream. A pot of beans explodes. You slide halfway out of the saddle dangle by 1 stirrup and come to rest nose first in a vat of lentils. Silence. Then applause. To your utter shame, the crowd is delighted. Someone yells, "Do it again." A knight shouts, "Best stew charge of the week." A child offers you a mint leaf. You crawl out dripping sticky and probably part legume now. Your helmet is dented. Your ego is ruined. But you're alive. Your opponent, to his credit, dismounts and offers a hand. "You've got spirit," he says. "Terrible form, but excellent chaos." You nod, spitting out beans. "Thanks. I was aiming for his left ear." Here's your quirky detail. Informal jousts did occur during Crusader campaigns more often than you'd think. They weren't always about training. Sometimes they were just a way to blow off steam-settled grudges or impress someone's cousin. Armor wasn't standardized. Lances broke. Teeth were lost. It was like a medieval hobby, equal parts, sport ego and nonsense. Scholars still debate whether these bouts distracted from the broader mission or helped maintain morale. You personally lean toward yes. Back at camp, someone ties a bean to your shield and declares you Sir Lentilbane. You pretend to be annoyed, but honestly, you've been called worse. That night, your bruises begin to set in. You limp like a pirate and groan with every breath. Your tentmate presents you with a hand-drawn crest, a horse rearing over a soup pot. You hang it proudly. You may not be a knight, you may not even be coordinated, but you jousted, and you survived. Barely. You've heard the sermons, "The Lord is with us. Our cause is righteous. The enemies of Christ shall fall." But then you meet them, not on the battlefield, not with swords raised or arrows flying. You meet them at the edge of a dusty trail past a broken aqueduct near a shaded grove of olive trees. There's no shouting, no charging, just conversation. It happens like this. You're sent on a scouting mission, one of those vague observe and report errands that usually mean wandering in circles for hours. But instead of circling back empty-handed, you stumble upon a caravan, a small group of Muslim traders resting in the shade. They spot you. You freeze. Then one of them, an older man with a long beard and a face like polished leather, raises a hand in greeting. Not a weapon, not a spell, just a wave. You don't run. You don't charge. You wave back. It begins with a few cautious words shouted across the distance. Then a few steps forward. Then somehow you're seated on a flat stone holding a cup of something warm and spicy. One of the younger men speaks enough Latin to translate. You learn their names, Hamid, Yusuf, Layla. You tell them yours. They laugh at your pronunciation. You laugh at theirs. And for the first time in months you realize they're not monsters, they're people. Hamid has a bad knee and a worse sense of humor. Layla once traveled to Damascus and says, "The wine there is better than anything in your camp." Yusuf is missing a finger, lost not in war but to a mule with a bad attitude. You talk. You share bread. Someone pulls out a lute. Someone else hums a song that reminds you of your mother's kitchen. You sit together in the shade, and for a few precious moments there is no war, no banners, no saints, no slogans, just tired people trying to survive. Here's your offbeat tidbit in between battles. Moments like this did happen. While Crusader propaganda painted Muslims, Jews, and Eastern Christians as enemies or heretics, many Crusaders interacted peacefully with local populations, trading, learning, even befriending. Some took local guides. Some married locals. Some questioned everything they'd been told. Scholars remain divided on how deep these relationships ran. Were they rare exceptions or quietly common beneath the blood-soaked headlines of history? The truth, as always, is probably more complicated and more human. When it's time to part ways, you stand slowly. Hamid bows slightly. Layla offers you a fig. Yusuf gives you a wrapped bundle, salted meat, and 2 dried dates. You want to say something profound. You don't. You just nod and whisper, "Thank you." The return to camp feels longer than usual, and colder. You walk past the same men you see every day, grimy, exhausted, fanatical in their routines. Someone sharpens a blade. Another chants a hymn. A third boasts about how many pagans he hopes to kill when the gates fall. You clutch the fig in your hand. It feels heavy. Later you sit by the fire listening to a night rant about purity and conquest. You say nothing. You think of Layla's voice, of Yusuf's laugh, of the moment when a man you were supposed to hate offered you his last piece of bread. You wonder if the people who preach this war met the people they fight. Would anything change? Probably not. But maybe. Maybe that's why the war must be loud so no one can hear the quiet truth. That night you nibble the fig. It's sweet. It tastes like peace. You wake to the sound of someone walking away, not marching, not storming off, just walking, slowly, softly, into the fog. You sit up and squint. A figure in a patched cloak bedroll slung across his back, sword sheathed, not raised. He's headed for the hills. He's deserting. You glance around. No one else seems to notice, or maybe they're pretending not to. A few faces remain turned away. One man scratches his beard very intently. Another stirs the stew a little too hard. You say nothing, because deep down you understand. Life in this camp has become less a fight for God, and more a fight against boredom, disease, hunger, and your own thoughts. The gates of Jerusalem still haven't fallen. The siege drags on. Your commander is growing twitchier. Your boots are 2 days from disintegration. Your soul, well, it's been fraying since Antioch. And you're not the only one. Whispers float like ash through camp. So-and-so snuck off last week. That night gone took 2 horses and his tent. A squire fled and joined a merchant caravan. Another ran off to marry a girl from a nearby village. Honestly, sounds like the smartest man in Christendom. Later that morning you pass by the latrine trenches and notice a tunic hanging from a bush. A familiar one. The man it belonged to gone. No note, no ceremony, just a hole where a person used to be. You understand the temptation. You really do. You're not proud of it, but you understand. Here's a historical tidbit. Desertion was more common in the Crusades than most chroniclers admitted. Entire units vanished. Some soldiers simply wandered off. Others defected to local powers. A few even converted, though, whether by conviction or survival is unclear. Scholars remain divided on whether these desertions were acts of cowardice or quiet rebellion. Were they moral failures, or the logical result of a campaign that promised paradise and delivered filth, blood, and theological squabbling over breakfast? Your own moment nearly comes that evening. You sit on a stone staring at your map. A path winds westward through hills away from the siege lines. You could follow it. You could vanish. No one would chase you. Maybe they'd thank you for making dinner portions slightly larger. Your bag is packed already. Always has been. Just in case. But you don't move. You sit. You stare. You feel the silence around you like a second cloak. Then your tent mate plops down beside you with a stolen onion and a loaf of bread that's definitely more mold than wheat. "Want half?" he asks. You nod. You chew in silence. Sometimes it's not heroism that keeps you going. It's inertia, or dumb loyalty, or a shared joke about moldy rations. You wonder what happened to the man who left. You hope he's warm. You hope he's alive. You hope he found something better. And you wonder if the gates never fall. If the war never ends, will you one day do the same? Not out of fear, but out of the quiet, exhausted need to feel human again. The journey home begins. and it's somehow worse than getting here. You thought the fighting was the hard part. The heat, the waiting, the hunger, the madness. But no one warned you about the return, about how long, chaotic, and unspeakably bitter it would feel to leave Jerusalem behind with nothing but blisters, a cracked shield and memories that rattle in your head like loose coins in a cursed purse. There is no parade, no choir of angels, just dust. You set out in a ragged line with a handful of others, some on foot, some with wounded horses, some carrying the bones of friends wrapped in cloth. No trumpets, just coughing, limping, muttered prayers, and the creaking of carts that seem held together by spit and holy fear. The city lies behind you now. Whether it fell or not depends on who's telling the story. Some claim it was divine victory. Others whisper of blood that soaked the stones of women and children cut down in the name of righteousness. You don't know what version you believe. You just know you didn't sleep the night after. You pass a hillside where a dozen Crusaders were buried hastily. The crosses are crooked, and the wind has already stolen most of the names. A knight walks beside you silent. He carries a child's sandal tied to his belt. He says nothing about it. Neither do you. Along the way, you're joined by others, stragglers, survivors, and souls who resemble ghosts more than pilgrims. One man hasn't spoken in 3 days. Another chants to himself, in a language no one understands. A third simply walks barefoot, his eyes on the horizon, bleeding from both heels. You share what you have: stale bread, sour water, a laugh when it feels safe. One night, someone finds a flask of wine buried in a pack. It's passed around like a holy relic. No one speaks while drinking. The silence says everything. Here's your grim little detail. Crusader return journeys were often more lethal than the campaigns themselves. Disease, bandits, betrayal. Some were sold into slavery. Some died penniless in foreign ports. Others made it home only to find their land seized, their families gone, or their tales dismissed as drunken fantasy. Scholars remain divided on how many Crusaders ever made it back. The records are fragmentary. Some disappeared from history completely. Some never intended to return at all. You finally reach the coast, a port town that smells of fish desperation and overpriced passage fees. Merchants line the docks shouting in 10 languages. You sell your extra tunic to afford a spot on a ship bound for somewhere vaguely European. The boat is small. It leaks. The captain looks like he's been cursed by at least 3 different bishops. But it floats. The sea is rough, and the days blur. You vomit over the side more than once. You think about dying with your face in the waves, and how anticlimactic that would be. But you don't die. You cling on. Eventually land appears on the horizon. Not home, but closer. You stumble off the boat legs, jelly stomach upside down. The first thing you see is a tree, not dead, not burned, just a tree. Green, growing. You cry, just a little. At an inn near the harbour, you sit by a fire with other returnees. No one says much. One man tries to sing. His voice cracks halfway through. Someone laughs. It's not cruel. Later, in a corner, you scribble a note on the back of a map. We came for heaven. We found dust. We leave with ghosts. You fold the map, press it to your chest, and let sleep take you. The road ahead is still long, but at least it points away from war. You thought the hardest questions would be asked before the crusade. Turns out the hardest ones come after. You're walking alone now. The others have scattered, some back to towns you've never heard of, others to monasteries or into the woods or perhaps into oblivion. You're following an old road that may or may not lead home, depending on how generous the locals are and how hungry the wolves feel. But the road is quiet, and that's when the thoughts come. What was it all for? You repeat that in your head like a psalm, like a riddle that has no answer. What did you earn from this? Glory no one cheered when you marched home. Salvation. Your hands still shake. Your dreams are thick with the faces of people you never meant to kill. You pass through a village, your first in days. The people eye you with a mix of awe and suspicion. A child points at your dented armor and whispers to his mother. She pulls him close. You sit in the square hoping someone might offer food. No one does. You don't blame them. You overhear the baker telling a neighbor another one of those holy warriors passed through yesterday, took our hens and left his lice. You keep your hood up. As you wander out of town, someone finally offers you bread. an old woman with a bent back and cloudy eyes. She presses it into your hand without a word. You thank her. She doesn't reply. You eat alone by a tree and cry harder than you have in months. Not from hunger, from shame. Because deep down you wanted this to mean something. You wanted the relics, the songs, the stories to be true. You wanted to be part of something holy. Instead, you watched a man be burned for accepting a book. You stole a fig from someone who offered you their last loaf. You buried comrades under rocks with no names. You joked about saints to stay sane. You stood beneath the gates of Jerusalem and didn't feel triumph. You felt tired. And you wonder now, did the people you marched to fight feel the same? Did they cry for home? Did they bury friends? Did they whisper to heaven and hear nothing back? You suspect they did. Here's the uncomfortable truth one historians still wrestle with. For every tale of Crusader glory, there's a counterweight of horror, of grief, of quiet regret that history books can't quite contain. For every shining cross, there's a rusted sword buried in someone else's field. For every hymn, a wail. Scholars still debate whether the Crusades were a righteous reclaiming or a colossal mistake. The jury's been out for centuries. And you're just one more pebble on the scale. You reach a hilltop by dusk. Below in the valley, a chapel bell rings faintly. You can't see it yet, but the sound is warm, familiar, almost home. You sit watching the sun bleed into the horizon. The sky burns orange and gold as if the heavens themselves are trying to cleanse the stain of what happened below. You whisper a prayer not for forgiveness, just for rest. And maybe someday for understanding. You find yourself at the gates of your own village, though at first you're not entirely sure it is your village. Time does that, blurs the edges, changes the smells, shrinks the streets you once thought wide. The gatekeeper stares at you for a long time before asking name you give it. He pauses. We thought you were dead. Fair assumption. Inside the streets are quieter than you remember. The old market has fewer stalls. The bakery's still there, thank God, and the smell of bread makes your knees weak. You don't step inside. You don't want to explain who you are. Not yet. Not like this. You walk past your childhood chapel. The bell is smaller than it sounded from the valley. The roof is patched with moss and old boards. You press a hand to the door, but don't go in. Too soon. Word spreads. A few faces emerge from behind windows, children peering at the figure in the travel-worn cloak. Someone finally calls your name cautiously, like tasting a memory. It's your cousin. She hugs you. You nearly fall apart in her arms. You're taken in, given soup, clean clothes, a bed that doesn't smell like firewood and regret. And for the first time, in what feels like centuries, you sleep through the night. But something has shifted. You no longer belong here, any more than you belong there. You're a cracked thing, patched, functional, but changed. And it shows. People ask questions. You answer as gently as you can. Did you see Jerusalem? Yes. Was it glorious? You hesitate. They take that as yes. Did you fight bravely? You say nothing. No one asks what it felt like. In time you settle. Your wounds heal. Your beard grows longer. You find work helping at the mill, hauling sacks, mending fences. A child hands you a daisy and calls you sir. You nearly cry again. But at night you lie awake and listen to the wind. Sometimes it howls like the camp at Acre. Sometimes it's quiet like the olive groves outside the city walls. You remember names you never spoke. You remember a fig that tasted like peace. One day at the chapel, the priest invites you to lead the closing prayer. You hesitate, but you step forward. You don't quote scripture. You just say, "May we be slower to fight, and quicker to listen, and may we never again confuse dust for heaven." No one claps, but a few people nod. You walk home alone, the sun warm on your back, the road silent except for birdsong. The nail from the relic cellar is still in your satchel. You keep it not for holiness, but for the weight. A reminder, you survived the crusade, and maybe, just maybe, you're learning how to live again. The sky darkens gently now, stars flickering above your quiet little village, the fields whispering as the wind rustles through the trees. No tents, no shouting, just the steady hum of nighttime peace. The road behind you stretches far longer than most could endure, and yet, here you are. Your bones are tired, but they no longer tremble. Your heart still carries the echoes of war, but it no longer beats in fear. You've made it back not unscathed, but whole enough to walk forward, to breathe, to sleep. You think of those who didn't return, the names you said aloud, only in prayer, the faces blurred by firelight, the ghosts that visited you each night for so long they too are quieter now. Not gone, but gentler, and the world, it's softer than you remembered. Bread is sweeter, grass is greener. Even the sky seems bigger, like it's making space just for you. So rest now, traveler. You've earned more than silence. You've earned peace. Let your body sink deep into stillness, your breath slow and steady. The past is behind you, and the road ahead for the first time leads nowhere but home. End of script. Sweet dreams.